the station at the edge of everything. I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I need you to understand what it felt like to stand inside Selim 9 on a quiet morning and believe, genuinely believe, that humanity had found its place in this galaxy. Not a powerful place, not a respected one, but a place, a corner, a small, tolerated corner where we paid our docking fees on time, kept our heads down, and tried not to spill anything on the floor of a universe that didn't particularly want us here. That was the agreement, unspoken but very real. And then came Captain Vorak. And then came Sergeant Mara Osai. And everything, every quiet, tolerated assumption about what humans were and weren't, broke apart like ice on a hot engine plate. I was stationed at Selim 9 as a logistics coordinator. My name is Darren Fell. I'm 34 years old, originally from a small agricultural settlement on Europa's inner ring, and I have never in my life considered myself a storyteller. My mother was, though. She used to say that the most important stories are the ones nobody planned to tell, the ones that happen while you're just trying to get through the day. This is one of those stories. Selim 9 sits at the boundary of what the Galactic Cooperative calls the Outer Expansion Zone, which is a diplomatic way of saying the region we haven't fully decided what to do with yet. It's a relay station, which means its whole purpose is to be a middle point, a way station. Ships refuel here, cargo gets sorted. Species who'd normally never be in the same room end up sharing a food hall because there's nowhere else to eat. Humans got assigned to Selim 9 about 6 years before this incident. We didn't exactly lobby for the posting. The cooperative gave it to us because nobody else wanted it. The station is functional but old. The atmospheric processors hum too loudly. Half the observation windows on the upper ring are cracked and have been patched with polymer resin that's slightly the wrong shade of transparent, so everything you see through them looks faintly amber, like old photographs. I actually liked that. It made the stars look warmer. There were about 300 humans on the station at any given time. Mix of civilian logistics staff, a small contingent of Earth Union peacekeepers, a handful of engineers and medics. We ran the day-to-day operations because, again, nobody else wanted to. The cooperative species who passed through, the Velhari, the Dran, the Saloon, the various merchant guilds, they used the station. They didn't run it. That distinction mattered to some of them more than I ever fully understood. And then there were the Predath. I should explain the Predath. Most species in the cooperative are, I don't want to say civilized, because that's the kind of word humans use when we mean something we shouldn't. But most species have found some accommodation with the idea that the galaxy is large, that other species exist, and that trade is more profitable than war. The Predath have technically accepted this too. They're full cooperative members. They have a seat on the assembly. They sign treaties and attend diplomatic functions and do all the things you're supposed to do. But the Predath also have what their own cultural historians call the legacy of the apex, which is their way of saying, for several thousand years before they achieved spaceflight, they were the uncontested top predators on their home world of Vreth. Every living thing on Vreth either hunted or was hunted. The Predath hunted everything. Nothing hunted the Predath. That history didn't just stay on Vreth, it came with them. They stand between 2.5 and 3 meters tall. Their skeletal structure is dense, heavier than it looks. I was told by one of our medical staff who treated a Predath with a minor injury and had to recalibrate all her equipment. Their skin is a deep charcoal gray, with bioluminescent markings along the jaw and forearms that brighten when they're angry or excited. They have 4 eyes, 2 forward-facing primary eyes like most predatory species, and 2 smaller secondary eyes on the upper sides of their head that track peripheral movement. They don't blink often. When they look at you, they look at all of you. And they know exactly what they're doing when they look at you that way. Predath ships pass through Selim 9 maybe once every 3 weeks. Trade routes mostly, sometimes cooperative business. They weren't frequent visitors, but they weren't rare ones either. The human staff had a quiet protocol for when Pradath were on the station. Not a written protocol, nobody had put it in a document because nobody wanted to admit it existed, but everyone knew it. Give them space. Don't make prolonged eye contact. Process their docking requests efficiently. Be polite, professional, invisible. It worked. For 6 years it worked. Until the morning Captain Vorak came through with a full honor escort and decided that invisible wasn't good enough anymore. The day started the way most days at Selim 9 started, with the sound of the atmospheric processors cycling up for the morning shift, a low mechanical groan that traveled through the walls and the floors and got into your bones before you were fully awake. I'd been on Selim 9 long enough that I didn't hear it anymore, the way you stop hearing traffic after you've lived next to a highway long enough. But new staff always noticed it. You could tell who just transferred in by whether or not they winced at 600. I was in the main logistics hub on level 3, running inventory checks on a cargo shipment that had come in the night before, 400 units of compressed atmospheric filtration medium, bound for a Velhari colony 2 systems out. Routine work. The kind that fills most of your day when you work at a relay station. My colleague, Priya Sarkar, was at the next station over, cross-referencing departure manifests. Priya is one of those people who always seems slightly more awake than everyone else around her. Sharp eyes, quick hands on the terminal, always has her coffee before she sits down. She was the one who noticed the alert come in about the Pradath escort frigate. Vorak, she said, reading the incoming tag, just the name, no other commentary. I looked up, which one is that? Pradath Fleet Captain, 3rd Division. She paused, pulled up his profile on her secondary screen. He's been flagged before, not for anything specific, just flagged. In station diplomatic terminology, flagged was a careful word. It meant that previous stations or ships had noted behavior worth recording, but that the behavior hadn't crossed any line that the cooperative's code would formally acknowledge, which was a very precise and ultimately meaningless distinction, but it was the one we had. How long's he docking? I asked. Manifest says 6 hours, fuel transfer and cargo inspection. 6 hours, not long enough. I'll notify Commander Osai, Priya said. And that was how I first heard her name that morning. Not dramatically, just practically. A notification, a name. Sergeant Mara Osai, Earth Union Peacekeeper, head of the Human Security Contingent at Selim 9. I'd worked alongside her for 4 months at that point, and I can tell you exactly what I thought of her in those 4 months. Competent. Measured. Difficult to read. The kind of person who listened to everything you said and responded to a different, deeper version of it, like she'd already heard the thing underneath your words before you finished saying them. She was 31, born in Accra, raised partly there and partly on the Martian settlements. She'd done 2 tours in the Belt conflict, the resource dispute that technically wasn't a war but had enough casualties that most people who'd been there called it one. She had a scar along her left jawline that she'd never explained, and that nobody had asked about more than once. She kept her hair close cropped, and her posture so upright it sometimes made you straighten your own spine just from looking at her. She wasn't physically large. Pradath large, obviously not, but even among humans she was compact. Maybe 1.67 meters. Lean. The kind of lean that comes from actual use rather than aesthetics. There was nothing decorative about Mara Osai. Everything about her was functional. I'm saying all this because when what happened later happened, a lot of people who heard the story afterward asked, what did she look like? Was she intimidating? Could you tell just by looking at her? And the answer is yes, if you were paying attention, but most people weren't. Most people that morning weren't paying attention to Mara at all. Most people were paying attention to Captain Vorak. The Pradath escort frigate, Bone Wind, docked at Base 7 at approximately 8:47 station time. I know the exact time because I was in the corridor near Base 7 when it happened. I'd gone down to verify the atmospheric filtration cargo transfer in person, because one of the numbers in the manifest hadn't matched the weight sensor reading, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't an error in the cargo itself. Small, mundane reason to be in exactly the right place. The docking procedure was normal. The bay doors opened, the boarding umbilical extended and locked. The Predath came through. There were 8 of them in the initial group. 6 soldiers in what I recognized as standard Predath fleet armor, a matte black composite with their unit markings in bioluminescent blue along the pauldrons. 2 flanking figures who seemed to be some kind of aide or diplomatic staff, carrying document cases. And then Vorek. He was taller than the others, not by a huge margin, maybe 4 or 5 centimeters, but somehow it felt like more. He had the kind of presence that reorganizes a room the moment it enters. His markings were brighter than his soldiers, a deep amber gold along his jaw, not the standard blue. I'd read later that that coloration indicated high genetic status among the Predath, something hereditary, something they were born into. He looked around the docking, bay the way you look around a place you already own. I watched the 2 human dock workers near the umbilical. They both took a step back, not running, not cowering, just adjusting. Finding slightly more distance, the protocol, the unwritten one. Vorek noticed. He always noticed things like that. The bioluminescent markings along his jaw pulsed once, briefly, like a single slow heartbeat. That was how I learned what that meant. It was amusement. The incident that everyone talks about, the thing that people who weren't there have since called the mocking, didn't happen right away. It built, the way bad things often do, incrementally, in stages that each seem manageable until suddenly they're not. It started in the transit corridor that connects Docking Bay 7 to the main commercial hub on Level 2. This is a wide corridor by Selam 9 standards, about 4 meters across, with overhead lighting panels that flicker slightly on the left side because there's been a wiring issue that we've filed 3 work orders to fix and which remains, to this day, unfixed. The floor is a composite material that scuffs easily, and you can see years of foot traffic in it, pale streaks in the gray surface where people have walked the same paths thousands of times. There are identification panels on the walls every 30 meters or so, and at the midpoint of the corridor, there's a wider alcove where 2 benches face each other, and a terminal dispenses station information to visitors. The Predath group moved through this corridor with Vorek at the center. Station staff moved aside. This was normal. Vorek's people moved in a configuration that took up most of the corridor's width, and the physics of it meant that anyone coming the other direction simply had to find another way or wait. Most people waited. Then Vorek's group rounded the midpoint and came upon Specialist Iona Marsh. Iona was 22. She'd been at the station for 8 months. She was one of our junior medical staff, and she was walking the corridor because she was coming back from a supply pickup in the cargo section. She was carrying a sealed medical container about the size of a small backpack, cradling it with both arms because it contained temperature-sensitive materials. She was walking quickly because she needed to get those materials back to cold storage, and she was looking down at the container to make sure the temperature readout on the side hadn't shifted. She looked up and saw the Predath group. She stopped. The container was in her arms. There wasn't room to step aside easily without putting it down. She looked around for an alternative route. There wasn't one that was quick. So she stood there at the midpoint of the corridor, cradling her medical container, waiting for the group to pass. Vorek stopped in front of her. He looked down at her. Iona told me later that it was the longest 6 seconds of her life. Then Vorek turned to one of his aides, one of the document-carrying figures, and said something in Predath. His voice was low but carried. The aide responded with a sound that, I'm told, translates roughly as a vocalization of shared contempt. The soldiers shifted. One of them looked at Iona with the particular kind of attention that a creature at the top of a food chain gives to something that has no defense and knows it. The translator, we had a station universal translator running in the corridor. It's a standard installation, processed what Vorek said a beat later. It rendered it in flat, mechanical standard. This one looks like it's trying to protect something. Does it think that stance will help it? Iona heard it, she understood it, she didn't move. What she did, and this part I admire enormously, was hold the container steady, hold Vorek's gaze for exactly one breath, and then step calmly to the right, pressing her back against the alcove wall, and wait for the group to pass. She didn't run, she didn't cry, she didn't look away. But Vorek wasn't done. He took one step toward her, just one. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't make any gesture that the cooperative's diplomatic codes would classify as threatening. He just took one step, leaned down very slightly, enough that his face was closer to hers than it had been, enough that the amber bioluminescence along his jaw was directly in her line of sight, and he spoke again. The translator caught it. "You're all so fragile, every single one of you. I don't understand why the cooperative pretends otherwise." He held that position for a moment. And then he turned and kept walking, and his group moved through and past her, and the corridor was quiet again. Iona stood there. She let out a breath. Her hands were shaking slightly. I saw it later on the corridor camera footage during the station review, but she held the container. She didn't drop it. The temperature-sensitive materials were fine. She walked the rest of the way to medical. She didn't report it immediately because she wasn't sure what she would even say. She'd been frightened. She'd been insulted. But nothing the station's formal complaint systems were designed for had technically occurred. She filed a personal note in the daily incident log that said, in total, contact with Captain Vorek, Transit Corridor Bay 7 to Hub, unwanted approach, translator incident, no physical harm. That note was how Mara Ose found out. I wasn't in the room when Mara read it. I heard about it from Priya, who heard from Kenji, one of the other peacekeepers who was there. This is second-hand, so I'm telling it as such. What I'm told is that Mara read the note, read it again, and then set down her datapad very carefully on the table. Not slammed. Carefully. With the kind of deliberateness that means you're choosing exactly how much force to use. She asked Kenji, "Where is Captain Vorek now?" Kenji told her, "The commercial hub level 2. Meeting with the station's cargo oversight officer to complete the inspection." Mara said, "Get me his docking schedule." Kenji pulled it. "Departure in 4 hours. Fuel transfer is about 40% complete. So he's here for 4 more hours." "Yes." "Good," Mara said. That was all she said. Kenji told me later he had no idea what she was planning to do. He asked her if she wanted backup. She considered this apparently for longer than you'd expect. Then she said, "Not yet." For the next 2 hours, Vorek's group moved through Selam 9 the way a pressure front moves through an atmosphere. There's no single dramatic thing you can point to. It's just the weight of it, the way space reconfigured around him, the way conversation stopped when his group entered a room and resumed, quieter when they left. Vorek made 2 more comments through the translator that got logged that day. In the food hall, when one of the kitchen staff, a human man named Tamaz, accidentally brushed past one of the Pradath soldiers while clearing a table, Vorek observed to his aide. Their awareness of physical space is remarkably poor, like creatures who have never had to be careful before. In the cargo inspection hall, when the human cargo oversight officer, a woman named Dr. Felicity Huang, queried a weight discrepancy in one of the Pradath cargo units, Vorek said, "Let the small one repeat itself. Sometimes it takes a few tries before they get the process right." Felicity Huang had 2 advanced degrees and 17 years of cargo logistics experience. She repeated herself, precisely and without inflection, and completed the inspection correctly. She filed a note similar to Iona's. The mood among the human staff at Selim 9 by early afternoon was, I'm trying to find the right word. Not panicked, not furious. Something that sits between those that has no clean name. A held breath, a tightening. The kind of collective feeling that happens when something is wrong and everyone knows it and nobody is sure what the right response is. We dealt with difficult species before. Rude merchants. Culturally arrogant Velhari academics who treated humans like interesting primitives. A Dran trader 2 years ago who'd made openly dismissive comments about human neurology. These things happened. You filed a note, you kept your head down, you got through the docking window. But Vorak was different in a way that's hard to articulate. Those others had been dismissive, yes, but there was a passivity to it, an indifference. Vorak wasn't indifferent. He was paying attention. He was choosing. There was a quality to it that felt deliberate in a way the others hadn't been, like he was demonstrating something, like the humans around him were not just being overlooked but being measured, and the measurement was the point. I was in the common staff room on level 3 around 1400 when Priya came in, poured herself a glass of water, and sat across from me without saying anything for about 30 seconds. Then she said, "You hear about what happened in the inspection hall?" "Yeah. That makes 3. I know." We sat with that. Outside the room's single porthole, the stars were the amber-warm color they always were through the patched polymer. I thought about my mother and her thing about stories, about the ones you don't plan to tell. "Mara's going to do something," Priya said. "I know. Is that good?" I thought about it. "I honestly don't know," I said. At 15:12 station time, Sergeant Mara Ose walked into the main commercial hub on level 2. She was in full peacekeeper uniform. Not armor. The Earth Union security protocol for Selim 9 specified light-duty dress for routine station operations, which meant the dark navy uniform jacket with the unit insignia on the shoulder, the rank markings, the standard-issue communications unit clipped at the collar. She had a sidearm holstered at her right hip. She was always armed on duty, but the sidearm wasn't drawn and her hand wasn't near it. She walked in alone. Vorak was at the central consultation area of the hub, a raised circular platform surrounded by low-profile data terminals, designed for interspecies business meetings. He had 2 of his soldiers standing behind him and his aide to his left. He appeared to be reviewing some documentation on a Pradath format display tablet. He wasn't the only non-human in the hub. There was a Velhari merchant family near the far food vendors, and a Saloon trade representative was moving through on the way to somewhere else. But he dominated the space the way certain presences do. Several humans were in the hub too, civilian staff, a few off-duty peacekeepers. When Mara walked in, I watched. I was there. I'd followed at a distance that I convinced myself was professional interest and was probably just honest fear. I watched the humans notice her, not with alarm, with something else, a kind of careful, held attention, like everyone was very still. Mara walked to a point approximately 4 meters from Vorak. She stopped. She said nothing. She waited. It took about 12 seconds for Vorak to register her. He was looking at his tablet. Then one of his secondary eyes, the upper peripheral ones, caught the stillness. He looked up. He looked at her. She looked at him. The translator was running. Everyone in the hub knew it. Vorak took in her uniform, her rank markings, her posture. His bioluminescent markings pulsed once, the amusement rhythm. Then he looked at his aide and spoke. "The station's little guard has come to see me." His aide made the contempt vocalization. Mara didn't move. Vorak looked back at her. He shifted slightly, not aggressive, not defensive, but reconfiguring, like he was adjusting his frame for a more interesting kind of interaction. He was, I realized, curious. She was a novelty, a small human who hadn't adjusted her distance. He spoke again, directly to her this time. What does the small warrior want? Has someone been hurt? Do you need to file a complaint? The last word in Pradath, the translator explained in a side note appended to the translation, carried a meaning closer to ceremonial whimper. It wasn't a direct translation artifact. Vorak had chosen that word specifically. Mara said in standard, "I'm not here to file anything, Captain." Vorak listened to the translation. The translator worked both ways, rendering standard into Pradath for him. His markings shifted, not the amusement rhythm, something slightly different. "No," he said through the translator. "No," she said. A pause. "Then what are you here for?" She looked at him steadily. "To introduce myself." There was a quiet in the hub that I've never experienced anywhere else. The Velhari family near the food vendors had gone still. The saloon representative had stopped moving. The humans were all very carefully not looking directly at the exchange and very clearly watching every part of it. Vorak's secondary eyes moved, just slightly, that peripheral tracking. "You want to introduce yourself," he said. "Yes," Mara said. "My name is Sergeant Mara Osai. I'm the head of the Earth Union security contingent on this station." "I know who you are." "Good, then this will be efficient." Another pause. Vorak looked at her the way you know how a cat looks at something that's moved in a way it didn't expect. That kind of reassessment, not threatened, not yet, but recalibrating. "You're here because of what happened in the corridors," he said. "Partly," Mara said. "I'm here because it's my job to know about interactions between visiting officers and station staff, and because I wanted to speak with you in person." "About what?" And here, this is the moment people ask about most when I tell this story. I've told it enough times now that I know where the silence falls, where people stop breathing a little. This is it. Mara said, "About what you think we are." Vorak's jaw markings brightened. Not the amusement rhythm this time, something more complex. He was interested now, genuinely. "What I think you are," he repeated. Not a question, tasting the phrasing. "You've made comments about my staff today, about their fragility, about their awareness, about their intelligence, and those comments tell me something about what you believe humans are." She paused. "I want to know if you've thought it through." The hub was completely silent. Vorak was quiet for a moment that felt much longer than it was. His soldiers shifted. His aide looked at him, apparently unsure whether to intervene. Then Vorak did something unexpected. He laughed. Not a human laugh, the Pradath version is lower, more resonant, something you feel in the chest rather than hear as a sound. But the meaning translated. He was genuinely amused. "The small warrior wants to debate," he said to his aide. He looked back at Mara. He stepped forward, one step, two. He crossed the 4 meters between them and stopped close, not touching, but close. The kind of distance that's designed to make you aware of the size differential. He was a full meter taller than her. His jaw was at the level of her forehead. His markings were bright. "You're brave," he said, looking down at her. "I'll acknowledge that." "Thank you," she said without moving. "But bravery without capability is just." He made a gesture with one hand. The translator offered, "a decorative quality." "I've heard that before," she said. "Then you've been around species that understand the truth." "I've been around species that believed it," she corrected. "That's different." The markings on his jaw flickered. "Is it?" "Yes. Because the cooperative tells you that all species are equal. Because the assembly signs documents that say human soldiers are comparable to Pradath warriors." "No," she said, "because I've fought. And because the species that walked into that fight believing they understood what they were fighting usually didn't walk out. There's a quality to a true standoff. I've seen a few in my time on Selim 9, not always between humans and other species. Sometimes between merchants, sometimes between cooperative officials, once memorably between 2 Dran brothers over a disputed cargo contract. There's a quality to it that's distinct from ordinary argument. Ordinary argument moves. It shifts. People try angles, find weaknesses, redirect. A true standoff doesn't move. It's two things in balance, and the balance is the danger. This was a true standoff. Vorek looked at Myra. Myra looked at Vorek. You fought, he said. Human military action. The belt conflict, perhaps. I've read the cooperative assessments. Then you know the outcome. I know humans didn't lose, he said. That's not the same as winning. In the belt, she said, it was. He considered this. What was your role? Close engagement specialist. Breaching units. She paused. The kind of work that requires you to go into places where you can't fire weapons because of the infrastructure, where everything is close, where the things that usually matter, size, armor, firepower, become problems instead of advantages. His markings shifted again, that complex rhythm. And you survived. Every time. How? It was a genuine question. I could tell, even from across the hub. Vorek was not pretending curiosity. He'd asked the question he actually wanted answered. Mara was quiet for a moment, then she said, the species we were fighting had a lot of advantages over us. Stronger, faster, better adapted to low-gravity close combat. They knew the terrain better than we did. She held his gaze. None of it mattered in the end. You know why? Tell me. Because they decided what we were before the fight started, she said. They had a picture of us in their head. Small, fragile, poor awareness of physical space. That picture was comfortable. It told them what they were going to see when they looked at us. Silence. And the thing about a picture, she said, is that it doesn't update in real time. Vorek stepped back. Just one step, but it was significant. He'd been leaning into the space between them, that deliberate pressure of proximity, and he stepped back, and the quality of the interaction changed. He looked at her differently now, not the way a predator looks at prey, something more careful. You're saying we've made a mistake, he said slowly. Mara said nothing for a moment, just looked at him. Then, I'm saying you've made an assumption. Whether it becomes a mistake depends on what you do with it. Another pause. In 3 hours, she said, your ship departs. You'll move on to wherever you're going. And you'll carry with you the picture you arrived with, fragile, poor awareness, ceremonial warriors. She paused. I hope that picture serves you well. The way she said it. Not threatening, not angry, quiet and precise, like someone reading a figure from a calibration instrument. The way she said it made it clear that she didn't think the picture would serve him well at all. Vorek's markings had gone dimmer. Not dark, but the bright amber amusement and the combat bright flicker were both gone. What was left was something I couldn't read, and the aide apparently could, because the aide had gone very still. Vorek said, in a different tone than any he'd used before in that hub. What would you have me see instead? I want to be clear. This is the moment I'll remember for the rest of my life. Not the standoff, not the sharp exchanges. This question. Because Vorek asked it like he meant it, not as a rhetorical gambit, not as a continuation of the mocking. He asked it like a being who had encountered something that had moved outside his model and was, for the first time in this interaction, genuinely asking. Mara let the question sit for a moment. Then she said, I'm not here to educate you about humans. That's not my job. And honestly, if you need educating at this point in your career, that's a problem I can't solve in a corridor conversation. Then what? I'm here, she said, so that when you leave this station you remember one thing. She held his gaze, all 4 of his eyes. You came here today and you told a 22-year-old medical specialist that she was fragile. You told a cargo officer with 17 years of experience that she needed things explained slowly. You told my staff, publicly, with a translator running, that you don't understand why the cooperative pretends we're anything worth considering. She paused. And nobody stopped you. We all stood there and let you say it, because that's what you expected. And we gave you what you expected because that's the agreement. We keep our heads down. You pass through. Nobody makes a scene. Vorik said nothing. But I want you to understand something about that agreement, Mara said. It's not because we can't, it's because we choose not to. Every single time, we choose. She let that sit. And the day any of your colleagues decides to test whether that choice is a permanent feature or just a courtesy, I need you to have thought about this conversation. I need you to have wondered, even once, what we're choosing not to do. The hub was silent. Someone, I think it was the saloon representative, near the corridor exit, made a sound that their species makes in moments of what I describe as stunned recalibration. A soft, low tone. Vorac's markings were fully dim now. He looked at Mara Ose for a long time. Then he said very quietly, "Your biggest mistake." She frowned slightly. "What?" "That's what I said," he said. "When I made those comments today about your specialist in the corridor, I said," he paused, the translator worked, "your biggest mistake will be to assume that something small is not dangerous. I say this all the time. It's a principle I train my soldiers on." Mara looked at him. He held her gaze. "I forgot it today," he said, "here on this station." A very long pause. "I won't forget it again," he said. He left the hub about 4 minutes after that. His group fell in around him. He didn't look back. I watched him go. When he was out of sight, the hub exhaled. There's no other way to describe it. Every being in that room, human, Velhari, Saloon, seemed to release something held. There was a soft eruption of sound, murmured conversations, a laugh from somewhere near the food vendors, the return of normal ambient station noise. I looked at Mara. She was still standing where she'd been. She hadn't moved. She was looking at the corridor opening where Vorak had gone. I walked over. I didn't have anything wise to say. I said, "Are you all right?" She looked at me. For a moment her face was very still. Then something relaxed in it slightly, the way a held note finally resolves. "Yeah," she said. "Go finish your inventory check, Darren." I laughed. I don't know why, I just laughed, and she almost smiled. The Bone Wind departed at 17:43, 43 minutes ahead of schedule. The fuel transfer had been completed, the cargo inspection had been finalized, and Captain Vorak had, apparently, decided not to spend his remaining 3 hours on the station. I don't know what he said to his crew. I don't know what he put in his own departure log. I know that when the docking bay sealed behind them and the station cameras tracked the frigate through the departure corridor and out into the dark, the shift supervisor, who was on comms at the time, told me later that she'd felt something she couldn't fully describe. "Like when pressure equalizes," she said. "You didn't realize how much there was until it was gone." There was a debrief the following morning. Station Commander Yelena Vasquez ran it. She'd been off station the previous day for a supply run coordination meeting at the nearest hub, and she'd received the full incident report when she returned. She went through it methodically. She was thorough, precise, fair. She asked Mara to walk through the decision to engage directly, rather than file a diplomatic report. Mara said, "A report would have been logged and processed in 6 to 10 weeks and resulted in a cooperative advisory note that would have been placed in Captain Vorak's file and reviewed at his next career assessment. I chose a different timeline." Vasquez looked at her. "You understand that what you did was outside standard protocol?" "Yes." "And you understand that if it had escalated?" "It wasn't going to escalate," Mara said. "How did you know that?" And this is the part of the debrief I think about most, because Mara paused, and it was a real pause, not a rhetorical one. She was actually considering how to answer. She said, "Because he was performing. Everything he did today, the comments, the proximity, the translator observations, it was performance. He wanted a reaction, not a fight. A reaction." She paused again. Performance stops when someone declines to be the audience. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then, and if you'd been wrong? Mara looked at her steadily. Then I'd have been wrong. But I wasn't. Yona Marsh came to find Mara later that day. I saw it happen. I was in the corridor near the medical bay when Yona came out and saw Mara walking past. Yona stopped, said her name. Mara stopped. Yona said, I heard what you said in the hub, what you told him. Yeah. The thing about choosing, Yona said, about how we always choose. Mara waited. I just wanted to say, Yona stopped, started again. In the corridor when he came up to me I was scared. I was really scared. And I've been feeling sort of, she made a gesture. Not a completing gesture, a trailing one. Like I handled it wrong. Mara shook her head. You handled it perfectly. I just stood there. You stood there, Mara said. You didn't drop what you were carrying, you didn't run. You held your position and then you moved when you could move safely. She looked at her. What do you think you should have done differently? Yona thought about it. I don't know. Exactly, Mara said, and she kept walking. 3 weeks later, a cooperative diplomatic communique came through the station's administrative channel. It was addressed to Station Commander Vasquez, but a copy was flagged for Mara's file. It was brief. It was from the Pradath Fleet Council. It acknowledged, in the precise, multi-layered language of cooperative diplomacy that manages to say things without quite saying them, that certain behaviors by a named officer during a recent transit stop had been noted, had been reviewed, and had been the subject of an internal conversation. It used a Pradath phrase that the translator footnoted at length. The phrase was something close to, in the most literal translation, a recalibration of assessment parameters was found to be warranted. In plain terms, they'd had a talk with Vorak. Whether that talk changed anything in the long run, I can't say. I'm a logistics coordinator. I deal in manifest numbers and cargo weight discrepancies. I don't have insight into the internal culture of a species whose home world I'll probably never visit. But I know that when the next Pradath vessel came through Selam 9, 2 months after the Bone Wind left, the officers aboard conducted their transit professionally, spoke to the cargo oversight staff with consistent courtesy, and were gone in under 4 hours without incident. I know that Yona Marsh has since been promoted to lead medical specialist and is currently overseeing the expansion of Selam 9's medical bay. I know that Dr. Felicity Huang submitted a formal commendation for Mara Osai through the Earth Union Station Operations System, citing, in the summary field, exceptional situational judgment and representation of human personnel. And I know that Mara, when she read the commendation, came to find me in the logistics hub. I'm not sure why she came to me specifically. I think I was just nearby, and she showed it to me on her datapad and said, "Is this what they actually think I did?" "I read it, more or less," I said. She handed the datapad back and looked out at the amber-warm stars through the patched polymer window. "I just introduced myself," she said. "Yeah," I said, "but the way you did it mattered." She was quiet for a moment. "It always does," she said. Interlude, what they said about it afterward. The following are accounts gathered from station personnel in the days following the incident. They're offered here as they were given, informal, first person, unedited. Priya Sarkar, Logistics Coordinator. I watched it on the corridor cameras later, the replay from the hub. I've watched it probably a dozen times now. And every time there's this moment, just before she says the thing about the picture, where Vorak leans in close and you can see, even on the camera, that he thinks he's about to get the reaction he's been getting all day. The step back, the look away, the managed retreat. And Mara just doesn't give it to him. She stands exactly where she is and she waits. And the thing I keep thinking is that's not bravery. It's not that she wasn't scared. I think she probably was scared, at least a little. It's that she'd already decided before she walked in there exactly what she was and wasn't going to do, and she stuck to it. That's different from not being scared. That's actually harder. Kenji Watanabe, peacekeeper. She didn't tell anyone what she was planning, which is classic Mara, honestly. She told me not yet when I asked about backup, and then I didn't see her again until after. My first instinct was to be annoyed, because we're supposed to coordinate. But then I thought about what would have happened if she'd walked in there with 6 peacekeepers. It becomes a different thing. It becomes a formation, a posture, a show of force. What she did going alone, it meant the conversation was exactly what she said it was, an introduction. It couldn't be read as anything else. She took away all the angles. Dr. Felicity Huang, cargo oversight. Thing he said to me about repeating myself, I've heard comments like that before from other species in other contexts. You get used to it the way you get used to any ambient unpleasantness. You develop a shell. You do your job. But after the hub incident, one of the junior Velhari staff who'd been nearby in the food hall came and found me and said, in their particular careful way, that they had observed the interaction and found it. They used the word disproportionate. Not toward Mara. Toward Vorak. They thought what he'd been doing was disproportionate. And the reason that mattered to me is that the Velhari are not traditionally our strongest advocates in the cooperative. So if they were saying that out loud to me directly, I think Mara's intervention changed something in how other species on the station saw the situation. Not just the Predath. Tomás Ribeiro, kitchen staff. I'll tell you what stayed with me. The next day, I'm in the food hall doing the morning setup, and one of the off-duty peacekeepers comes in, not Mara, one of the others, and she sits at the counter and she says, just like that, "How are you doing, Tomás?" Just that. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time a peacekeeper on duty had asked me that, and I'm not saying that's related. But the feeling in the station was different that day, like something had been said out loud that we'd all been not saying for a long time, and saying it out loud changed the air. Part 2. What came 3 months later. Note, the following section concerns events that occurred at Selim 9 approximately 11 weeks after the Vorak incident. It is included here because it is not separable from the first account. It is, in fact, the completion of it. I was not present for the events of this section. I want to be clear about that. What follows is reconstructed from official station logs, peacekeeper after-action reports, the testimonies of those who were there, and one conversation I had with Mara herself, about 2 weeks after it was all over, during a quiet shift change when the hub was almost empty, and she seemed, for once, in a mood to talk. 3 months after the Bone Wind left Selim 9, a situation developed at the station that began as a routine commercial dispute and became something else. A merchant convoy, 3 ships, mixed-species crew, primarily Dran and Saloon traders, arrived for a standard refueling and cargo transfer. They were accompanied, unexpectedly, by a Predath enforcement vessel. The Predath vessel's captain, a different captain from Vorak, a name in the logs as Fleet Subcommander Tharek, had flagged the convoy for an inspection related to a cooperative trade compliance investigation. On its face, this was legal. The Predath fleet operated as one of several enforcement arms within the cooperative's trade regulation framework in this region. Tharek had the authority to inspect the convoy. What Tharek also had, apparently, was a particular approach to that authority. The convoy crew, 12 individuals, a mix of species but including 3 humans who were part of the Dran trading firm's human liaison team, were instructed to wait in Bay 4 while the inspection was conducted. The inspection ran long, 6 hours, then 8. The convoy crew were given no update and no timeline. By hour 10, 2 of the Saloon crew members had a medical issue. Saloon physiology requires regular caloric intake, and they'd been held without access to food. One of the human liaisons, a man named Joseph Akampong, requested through the station communications system that the detained group be given access to the station food facilities. Therek's response, logged in the station communications system. The cargo inspection will proceed on the inspection team's timeline. Requests from the detained party will be addressed after inspection completion. Joseph Akampong sent a second request, noted that the saloon crew members were experiencing medical distress, asked for at minimum medical staff access. Therek's response, the detained party has not been authorized medical access. Cooperation with the ongoing inspection will expedite its conclusion. This is where the station log gets very precise about timestamps. At 22:17 station time, Sergeant Mara Ose received the flagged communication. The communication system had been set, after the Vorak incident, to flag any interactions between visiting enforcement vessels and station personnel that involved denied access or rights questions. It had been a quiet flag. No one had expected it to activate so quickly. At 22:19, Mara was in her uniform and heading for Bay 4. At 22:23, she arrived at the Bay 4 access corridor, where Therek's 2 enforcement officers were positioned at the checkpoint. What happened in the next 45 minutes is laid out in the Peacekeeper After Action report in a lot of very careful language. I'm going to try to translate it into something more honest. Mara presented her credentials at the checkpoint. Therek's officers told her the bay was under enforcement hold and no station personnel were authorized entry. She told them she was the head of station security and that there were medical concerns with individuals currently held in the bay. They told her that authorization for entry would have to come from Sub-Commander Therek. She asked them to contact Therek. They told her they were not currently in contact with Therek and could not facilitate the request. There are moments in bureaucratic situations, in any situation where authority is being used as a wall, where the correct response is to find a door. Mara had been in enough of them to know where the doors usually were. She stepped back from the checkpoint. She opened her communication unit. She contacted the station's central systems and formally logged a medical emergency request for the individuals in Bay 4. Under Selam 9's own station protocols, which were Earth Union protocols, because humans ran the station, a logged medical emergency required medical access to any part of the station within 40 minutes. She then contacted Dr. Lena Vogt, the station's senior medical officer, and told her there was a logged emergency. Lena was there in 20 minutes. The enforcement officers at the checkpoint looked at the medical documentation that Lena produced. They looked at Mara's station authority credentials. They looked at each other. They were, at this point, outside their training parameters. They let them through. The medical access resolved the immediate situation. The saloon crew members received the nutritional support they needed. The 3 human liaisons, Joseph Akampong and his 2 colleagues, Nadia Boyle and Marcus Tran, were given a full status update, documentation of their rights under cooperative statutes, and direct communication to the Earth Union Trade Liaison Office 3 stations away. Then Therek came. He came in at 23:01, which is to say 38 minutes after Mara had arrived in Bay 4 with the medical team. He was, by the accounts of everyone present, extremely angry. His markings were full bright, the combat bright flicker that I'd read about from the Vorak incident descriptions. He was bigger than Vorak, not taller, but broader, the kind of build that doesn't leave you in any uncertainty about what it could do in a physical confrontation. He said through the translator, "Who authorized this access?" Mara said, "I did." He turned to her. "You," he said, "do not have the authority to override an active enforcement hold." "No," she said, "but I have the authority to respond to a medical emergency on this station. Those are different things. The medical situation didn't override your inspection hold. We addressed the medical situation. The inspection can continue. Therick stared at her. Marcus Tran told me later, I spoke with him a month after, when the convoy had completed its business, and he was passing back through Selam 9, that in the moment Therick came in, he'd been genuinely afraid. Fulbright Pradath markings, that size, that fury, there was nothing in his experience that told him it was going to be okay. And then he'd watched Mara. He said, she wasn't calm the way someone is calm when they're not scared. She was calm the way someone is calm when they've decided what they're doing and they know the ground under their feet. He paused. I've never seen anything like it, honestly. She made the whole room feel like it was on her terms. I still don't know how. Therick and Mara spoke for 11 minutes, documented in the station log. It was not easy. It wasn't the measured, considered exchange that the Vorak conversation had been, with its strange collaborative quality at the end. Therick was angrier and less interested in recalibrating. He was, from his own worldview, completely correct. The station security officer had interfered with an authorized enforcement action. Mara's position, stated and restated, she had not interfered with the inspection. She had responded to a medical emergency as station protocols required. The inspection was still active. Nothing had been removed, altered, or contaminated. She was prepared to provide the full station security log for the past 3 hours, in real time, to demonstrate this. The thing about having a meticulous log is that it's very difficult to argue with. At the end of the 11 minutes, Therick did not concede. He did not apologize. He did not make any statement that the record could later call a retraction. What he did was turn and walk back to his inspection, which resumed and completed, and the convoy was cleared at 1:30 for the following morning. Joseph Akampong found Mara the next day. He found her in the logistics hub of all places, because she'd come down to talk to Priya about something related to the security log documentation, and he'd been asking around the station about where to find her. He was a middle-aged man, solidly built, with the kind of face that has had a lot of experience in it. He looked at her and he said, I need you to know something. She waited. My daughter is 8, he said. I've been in trade routes for 19 years. I've had inspections go long before. I've been held in bays before. But I've never had someone just show up. Like it was the obvious thing to do. Like of course you show up. Mara said, you logged the emergency. Your log is what triggered the flag. You still had to come. She was quiet a moment. Yeah, she said. He held out his hand. Human gesture, she shook it. My daughter's going to hear about this, he said. I'm going to tell her. She's going to want to know what you looked like. Mara looked slightly uncomfortable. Tell her I looked like a station security officer. He smiled. I'll tell her you looked like someone who knew what they were doing, he said. Part 3. The conversation I had with her. 2 weeks after the Bay 4 incident, Level 3 Common Staff Room, 623. She had coffee. I had one of those protein bar things that taste like cardboard covered in chocolate-flavored optimism. I asked her about the conversation with Vorak. The moment at the end when he repeated her own line back to her, your biggest mistake, and explained that it was his own principle, a thing he trained his soldiers on, that he'd forgotten it that day. I asked her if she'd believed him. She thought about it for a while. I think he believed it, she said. I think in that moment that was a real thing he was saying. Whether it stayed real after he left, whether it made it back onto his ship and into his practice, I don't know. Does it matter? I asked. She looked at me. Of course it matters, but I can't control that. I can only control what I said and when I said it. I ate some of my cardboard bar. What made you think it would work? The direct approach, going in alone. I didn't know it would work, she said. I thought it had a better chance of working than the alternatives. Which were? File a report, confront him with backup, Ignore it and write notes for the incident log. Why not the backup option? Because it changes what the conversation is about, she said. She held her coffee mug in both hands. If I walk in with 6 peacekeepers, the conversation is about force, about measurement, his versus ours. And that's not a conversation I wanted. I wanted a conversation about understanding. And you thought he was capable of that. She considered. I thought there was a Vorak capable of that somewhere. Whether the version that had spent a day mocking station staff was still connected to that version, that was the question. And he was. He was, she said. A pause. The Bay 4 one was harder, she said, unprompted. Tharek wasn't interested in understanding anything. He was interested in being correct. Those are the harder ones. She looked out at the amber stars. With Vorak, there was a moment, I could feel it, where his actual intelligence engaged with what I was saying, where the performance stopped and something real started. Tharek never had that moment. He was angry from the second he walked in, and he was going to stay angry regardless of what I said. But it still worked. It worked because I had a log and a medical protocol, she said. Not because of anything I said, which is important to remember. You can have the right conversation and still lose it if you don't have the right documentation. I laughed. That's less romantic than the story people are telling. She shrugged. Stories are useful, but procedures win. She told me one other thing that morning. It wasn't a long thing. She said it, and then we finished our drinks and went back to work. But I've thought about it a lot. She said, the reason Vorak forgot his own principle, forget about small things, they might be dangerous, is because we'd made it very comfortable for him to forget it. 6 years of humans on this station behaving exactly as expected. Heads down, efficient, invisible. We trained him to forget, not on purpose, but that's what we did. So what you did was interrupted the training, she said. That's all, just interrupted it. She finished her coffee. It's not about being impressive or dramatic or winning some standoff. It's just if you keep telling something that you're what it expects, eventually that expectation becomes the thing it knows. And the thing it knows is all it can see. She stood up. We have to be more than what's expected, she said. Not louder, not angrier, just more, enough that the picture can't hold. She left. I sat there with my cardboard bar for a while. The stars were amber through the cracked window. Epilogue, a note about Selim 9. Relay Station Selim 9 is still operational. It still runs on humans mostly. The atmospheric processors still grown at 600. The windows are still the wrong shade of amber. The inventory systems still throw off occasional weight discrepancies that require in-person verification. Mara Os was promoted to Station Security Commander 8 months after the incidents described in this account. She still works at Selim 9. I asked her once if she'd ever wanted a bigger posting. One of the inner-ring stations, the major hubs closer to the cooperative's political center. She said, this is where the work is. I believed her. The cooperative's outer expansion zone has seen, in the 2 years since the Vorak incident, a measurable, I use that word carefully, a measurable shift in the reported quality of interspecies interactions at human-operated stations. The data isn't conclusive. These things never are, but the pattern is there if you look for it. More voices, more logs, more moments like the one in the hub where a human in a station uniform stood in a room full of watching eyes and declined to step back and said, I want to know if you've thought it through. Not threatening, not performing, just present, fully and unmistakably present. Maybe that's all any of us can be. But maybe, in this particular galaxy, at this particular time, it's enough. Yona Marsh told me, the last time I talked to her before she moved to the expanded medical wing, that she still thinks about the corridor. Still thinks about standing there with the container in her arms, looking up at Vorak's jaw markings, holding her ground through 6 seconds that felt like a lifetime. She said, "I know I was scared, I know I was, but I also know I didn't move. And I've thought a lot about why, and the answer I keep coming back to is, I didn't know what moving would look like. I didn't have a picture of myself moving, only a picture of myself staying." She paused. I think that's what Mara does for all of us, actually. She gives us a picture of ourselves staying. I don't know what Captain Vorik is doing now. I don't know if the conversation he had with Mara Osai in the commercial hub of a small amber-windowed relay station at the edge of the cooperative's expansion zone is something he carried with him or something. He set down the moment the bone wind cleared the departure corridor and slipped into the dark. I hope he carried it. I hope on some ship somewhere in the outer expansion zone, on some morning when a Pradath fleet captain is briefing his soldiers on field protocol and principles, he says, "Forget about small things being small. That assumption is your biggest mistake." And I hope he means it. Account compiled by Darren Fell, Logistics Coordinator, Relay Station Selam 9, Outer Expansion Zone. Filed with the Earth Union Cultural Documentation Archive, 14 months after the primary incident. Total verified witnesses, 11. Single verified outcome, nobody moved who didn't choose to.